I remembered that I really wanted to have a conversation with you. And it was because you were one of the main people that shared you had gone through CPTSD and you had gone through just the rainbow of trauma that you can go through as a kid. And now here you are, clearly in a far better place than what I imagined you would have been. So can we go?
Yes.
You can share as much as you want and not share as much as you want, and go wherever you want to go. But where can we start with CPTSD? Are you comfortable sharing what, not necessarily, doesn't have to be the trauma that you went through, but the damage that the trauma did to you?
Yeah. So I'll tell the story of how I ended up in the therapist office who diagnosed me.
Yeah.
So I was a young mother. I had two children. They were just under 2 years apart. And the younger one wasn't sleeping, laying down. So I would hold him every night. And I started, so I was very sleep deprived. And I also started, my oldest son was then about 3 years old. And I started to get what I thought at the time was really like irrational concerns about him being left alone with his dad. I didn't want him with his grandfather, like unsupervised at all. I was really, really freaked out about him being around male relatives without any like reason for it.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that I was so tired and then all of this was starting to activate in my mind, and I ended up having I don't know what they would call it, a psychotic break. I ended up just, I literally on my legs ran away from home. And I would end up like, I'd call home and my then husband would answer the phone. Long story short, I was on the payphone with him and I looked up and realized there were all these police cars in the parking lot of the gas station where I was at. And that's when I realized there might be a problem. I was like, what, like there was almost like I was in this thing, this fog, and there was almost this part of me that was witnessing this and thinking, what in the world is going on? So I ended up getting a ride downtown in the back of a police car, and they told me, you need to get help because if this happens again, you could risk losing your children. And so I just looked on my insurance and, found a therapist who was close. And I had an appointment and let her know kind of the gist of the situation. And then in the second appointment, I remember I was looking down at the carpet and I told her something I'd never told another human being in my life, that I had been sexually abused when I was 3-4 years old. And I was terrified to let my oldest son out of my sight. And she said, I expected as much. Now we can get to work.
Yeah.
And that's when she ended up being someone who specialized in trauma. I thought I had been diagnosed bipolar, depressive. I'd been on all the medications. I'd been hospitalized. I had tried so many things. I had never been given a trauma diagnosis. And I, of course, this was back in 2007 timeframe.
So that's even when CPTSD wasn't really a thing.
It was not a thing. And it was certainly not a diagnosis that a young mother would receive.
No.
Yeah. So I'm incredibly grateful to that therapist that I just happened, of all the therapists in that city, that I ended up walking into her office. And in a way, I also, I think I'm incredibly grateful that I was a mother of young children, because if I hadn't had these activating events, I don't think I would have gotten the help I needed.
Yeah. Wow. So can we talk about, there's something that you said in all of that that I heard, which was the irrational thoughts. Because the
Mm.
irrational thoughts come with the CPTSD. So I've just got to pick my dog up because she's dying
Yes.
to come up onto my lap. The CPTSD comes with those just completely irrational fears that you think are normal.
Yes.
You think you don't identify with them being irrational. They feel real. They feel,
Yes.
for me, I remember, it's a weird one, but I could not take my daughter in to the room when I was getting anything out of the freezer
Mm-hmm.
because I kept having this irrational thought that I was going to put her in the freezer and shut the door and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
whenever I thought that, I thought, because I went through shocking postnatal depression after I gave birth. And it's those irrational thoughts that you really think are real. So
Yes.
can you share, apart from the one with you not wanting to let any men around your kids, which makes
Mm-hmm.
total sense, were there any others that you remember that you had that you can see now were completely irrational thoughts?
Oh, well, and then even now, I think I don't know if it's really that irrational. I think young parenthood it really tests the limits of your sanity a little bit anyway,
Yeah.
even without a trauma background. But just I remember feeling afraid of carrying my son past the top of the staircase because I would just imagine, like, not imagine throwing him down the stairs, but the fear that I might,
Yeah.
or not
Yeah.
wanting to bathe him because I was afraid. I remember when I was a child and I was scared to put my head under the faucet in the tub to have my hair, the soap rinsed out. And I was terrified to bathe him, anything involving like washing his head. So the irrational thoughts were really around my ability to protect and take care of these little people.
Mm.
Mhm.
Which I'm guessing came from your trauma as a kid and not feeling
Yes.
safe, not feeling
Hmm.
safe with your parents. So
Hmm.
then not feeling safe as a parent.
Absolutely. It's almost what's so interesting. And of course, now my children are almost 18 and just turned 16.
Yeah.
And I notice that as they hit certain milestones, I will have thinking patterns like
Mm.
activate. It's almost
Yeah.
um, like, oh, you've gotten to this level, and bink, now there's this thinking that's here for me to navigate. And at the time, it was really, I did not know that, oh, this is my trauma brain. This is a habit. This is a activated memory that is being role played out now. But even now, to this day, with my oldest son turning 18, I'm having all kinds of um, just curious thinking patterns activating because my brain can't tell the difference between his choices in being 18 and me and the choices I made when I was turning 18.
Mm.
Mhm.
So I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I have something similar with my daughter. When
Mhm.
I could play with her all the way up until she turned about 3,
Mhm.
and then something just like
Mhm.
this switch just went on, and all of a sudden
Yep.
I just didn't know how to play with her. And then when I look
Yeah.
back at my past, I realized that when I was 3, that's when my sister went to school. That's when she started school,
Mhm.
and she got taken away from me. So all of a sudden I've got
Mhm.
someone to play with every day up until 3, and then
Yep.
that play friend is now gone, and now
Mhm.
I'm on my own with a nanny who quite literally just plonked me in front of television.
Mhm.
And so it creates these, like, your life creates these patterns that get
Mhm.
triggered as your kids get older, and you're the only other person
Yeah.
I've talked to that has kind of
Yeah.
identified that they
Yeah.
they trigger off. And then I'm not looking forward to my daughter becoming a teenager, mainly because of the teenager I was,
Mhm. Mhm.
because of the patterns and the feelings that I had when I hit teenagehood.
Mhm.
um so then where did you, once you knew you had CPTSD,
Mhm.
how did you unravel that? Because I'm assuming you have flashbacks Like, would you be
Oh,
in
I would have,
conversation with someone and then all of a
yeah,
sudden you'd have an emotional reaction that wasn't even related to the person in front of you, just something, it might be a sound or something would
yep.
create a flashback. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would happen. I had a lot of dissociation where I was there but not there.
Yeah.
Um, and when I received the diagnosis, at first I was like, what is this? This is for soldiers. Like soldiers go to war. And then
Yeah.
there was just the emergence of research on trauma. And then now there's a lot of research on the difference between a grown adult going into a situation and having trauma and a child who is also developing having traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
And yet I devoured all the literature I could find. Whenever there's a question in my life, my answer is research. And it was the first time that I really felt understood by
Mm.
my diagnosis, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um I saw this and I thought, oh, and for me, what really changed my life was saying this is a brain injury. This is not personality. I'm not depressive. It's not a chemical thing. It's a brain injury.
Mm.
And that shift of perspective and not feeling like there was like a failing, like I wasn't a broken person with a chemical imbalance, which is what they would say in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Um, it really shifted my relationship to what was going on with me, and having that framework of saying, oh yes, I remember reading the DSM and going, yes, 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 yes. And it for me, seeing like, oh, flashbacks, yes, I experience them as they describe. Dissociation, yes, I experience it as it described. It actually made me feel more normal.
Yeah, you're
I was
lucky.
like, oh, this is this is a thing that is it's predictable.
Yeah.
It's a brain injury that happened at a certain point in time and the results were predictable.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of comfort in that, which almost everybody who hears that is like, what an unusual response. But um, it really was a comfort to me to say, oh, yes, this is no different than getting diabetes
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense because there's such an element of when it's a chemical imbalance, it's like, well, there's no, what can I do about that other
Yeah.
than take
Oh,
medication, which doesn't help? Because,
yeah.
like you said, it's not a chemical imbalance. It's
Hmm.
like there's this part of your brain that
Hmm.
somewhere along the line got
Hmm.
damaged. And it
Hmm.
just, especially when trauma, this is what I kind of got is that when it happens as a kid, especially if it happens when you're really young. So for me, my first trauma happened within a couple of days of me being born.
Hmm.
When it happens when you're really young, like under 5 to 6, when you
Hmm.
don't have that any rational, logical
Hmm.
comprehension or understanding, to me, it creates this neural pathway that is just damaged, and
Hmm.
then it stays damaged, and then every choice that you make is from that damaged place,
Hmm.
and so you make a choice that's damaged, and then that one sends you on another path that's damaged because the
Hmm.
original one was damaged, and then you end up in this place where you're so far away from that whole
Hmm.
healthy, abundant neural pathway system that
Hmm.
a kid who was raised in a loving environment would have. And then it's like, well, how the heck do I get from all the way over here back to here? How do I heal that? How do I,
Hmm.
like, where do I go from here? So this is my question. Where did you go from there then? Once you
Yeah.
understood you had a broken brain, that there was
Hmm.
damage,
Hmm.
where did you go from there? Like, what did you start doing to bring
Hmm.
yourself to where you are now? Because this is kind of where I am. I'm here going, I get my brain is broken. I can see my brain is broken. And I'm starting to separate myself, going, no, this is that, like, this is my brain. It's not doing very good right now.
Hmm.
Where did you go from this point?
Yeah, I think it was so interesting, even the body language, because it really is like a child's brain. We are, as children, sponging. We're
Mm,
absorbing all of this information from our environment, starting with the fundamental question, are we safe with our caregivers? And
yeah.
if the answer is no, most of the time, the child then thinks, oh, it's me. They wouldn't maybe necessarily describe it in those words as children, but almost everybody that I've worked with who has childhood trauma, it becomes, I am wrong. I am not right. I am different.
Mm,
I am something, because there wasn't the environment that's like, we're safe, we're okay, you're okay. So back to that question of what did I actually start to do?
mm,
Um, that is such a challenging question to answer, in the sense that I was diagnosed in 2007, 2008. It's a little murky, because that whole time period for me is a little bit murky. But I remember, um, we relocated from the state we were in to another state in 2010, and in a way, I think having like that shift of environment was valuable, because I was coming into a new city. I didn't know anybody but the people I was living with. Um, I would say, in summary, I think my thinking pattern at the time was, um, I will try everything that I can to give my kids the best parenting experience possible. So I think for me, a large part of my journey started with wanting to provide my children with what I didn't have, which was a safe, loving home.
yeah.
And it's actually, I've never really thought about it. Like I can't even imagine what I would have done without that as my core why.
Mm,
But then, as it went from 2010 to 2012, I started to really, um, the best way I can describe it is almost like standing up for myself.
mhm,
Like, really, I started to flirt with the idea that I wasn't broken, that I was someone who may have been hurt, but that didn't mean that I was broken. I think at some point I started seeing how my children saw me, and it was in such a contrast to how I saw myself. Like, they thought I
yeah.
was amazing,
And what
when they
age
were
were
little
they at this
kids.
point? So what age were they in
At this
2010?
point, I want to say, um, when they were around like 4 to 6, 5 to 7,
Yeah.
and they were, they had loving parents who were engaged and involved. They didn't have the same financial or safety conditions that I did. And
Mm,
I started to see how like secure they felt with me. And that
mm,
was out of sync with how secure I felt in myself.
mhm,
And then, um, I started to like want more for myself. Like um, I wanted for myself. And long story short, I ended up getting divorced from their dad.
mhm,
And that was a huge catalyst, because my oldest son is very similar to his dad in some ways in his personality. And
mhm,
I started to notice a little bit of friction there. And I thought, oh, I don't want to break this relationship too. So that really led me on a path of, how can I be myself, care for myself, and care for someone else, and nourish these relationships with my kids. And I think that those outside decisions, like those decisions to take care of these outside relationships, it couldn't help but change my relationship with myself.
mm. So then it kind of sounds like your trauma wasn't
Mm.
impacting your behavior so much that it impacted your kids' lives.
Hmm, if I'm really honest, I think it did. I mean, I will say that like my kids do not like it when I cry. They have a very strong reaction to that.
Mhm.
And I know when they were younger, they saw a lot more emoting. Um, but I also felt a really, especially when they started going to elementary school, and this sounds
Mhm.
terrible to say, but it's just the truth. Once they started going to school and I knew they would be having conversations with friends and teachers, I thought, I can't keep expressing myself and like lashing out and overreacting in front of them because now they're witnesses, you know?
And they might tell somebody.
Yes, because that was when I
Yeah.
was growing up. It was like, don't tell anyone what's going on in the house, and no one's going to believe you if you do. And I thought, oh, I never wanted to put my kids into that obligation where they didn't want to have friends over or they didn't feel comfortable talking about me because I was, unhinged.
You're
Yeah.
lucky. I worry that my trauma has done damage to my daughter. She can't avoid it. She went through
Mm,
my mum passing away, and then she's gone through me having an eating disorder. And I think I can't avoid it. But
mm,
the thing that I have done, which I'm really proud of, is consistently, almost from day one, making sure she understands she's not actually doing anything wrong.
mm,
So if I had a meltdown, or if I was feeling overwhelmed and
mm,
reacting through that overwhelmment, then while I'm standing there having a meltdown, I'll be looking at her saying, this is not about you. This is something to do with
mhm,
me going back to my childhood. It's got nothing to do with you, but you're standing in
mm,
front of me. So you're
mhm,
getting it. And I've been doing that
yeah,
with her since she was about 2.
mm,
So now if something happens and I'll say to her, this isn't about you. She goes, yeah, I know it's about you. It's got nothing to do with me.
mm,
I'm
mm,
perfect. And like, because I've been saying this to her for the
yeah,
last 6 years
yeah,
of whatever I'm reacting with and however I'm responding has
mhm,
nothing to do with you.
yeah,
And I think it's so hard when you go through trauma and you have kids. And of course,
mm,
then I think the kids are a trigger
mhm, yeah,
for all the different timelines in your life that you had trauma, like we said at the beginning.
mhm,
When your kids got to a certain age, it would trigger something else in you.
mhm,
um it's a struggle. So
mm,
I'm curious to know, after you went through the divorce,
mhm,
how what was kind of your next phase, because you're here
mm,
now, and then
mhm,
you created that, you went through a disassociation. How did you reassociate with your physical body?
mm,
Because obviously with trauma, especially sexual abuse,
yeah,
you don't just disassociate with your brain, but you disassociate with your physical body. Like, you
yeah,
leave. How
yeah,
did you What was your process to bringing yourself back into your physical body, which I'm
mm,
assuming you did, given where
yes.
you are now?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question, and I don't feel like we talk a lot about sexuality
Mm,
in general. Um, in fact, in my practice, one of my areas of specialty is low intimacy relationships because for me, the safest thing was to just not have sex, which was not healthy for the relationship. But with the kid's dad, um, I wasn't able to bridge that gap of um, because I just realized I didn't really like him all that much to begin with. I married him because I thought he was safe,
yeah.
and that came with its own unexpected baggage. Actually, when
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, good, you're safe, and in a way, it's like I don't love you that much, which increases that sense of safety. But then it impacted that sense of attraction and connection.
Mm.
So that relationship, not great. Subsequently, I think what changed for me is it's like in Pretty Woman when she says, I say who and I say when. Um, and I joke about that, but something about like deciding, like I was convinced I would do anything to keep my family together, that I would stay married to their dad, that we would raise the kids. Um, and when I decided that my suffering was probably hurting the kids anyway, like this idea of keeping the family together.
Mm.
I don't think it was doing anyone any favors. And when I decided that I was willing to include myself in the people I take care of, that included sex. Like,
Mm.
I decided I was no longer going to say yes when it wasn't a body yes, whatever the consequences were.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that, I think for a lot of childhood sexual abuse survivors, we give in because it's safer and easier. And we find ourselves in a lot of situations that we wouldn't wish on our daughters,
Yeah.
or our best friends. But for me, it really came down to I will never say yes to a sexual encounter if my body says it's a no.
Mm.
I'm not gonna talk myself into anything ever again.
Mm. Which is so much easier to do when you're older, but when you're younger, I remember
Mm-hmm.
I've only had one experience with all the men I've been with. There've been a few over the years with my daddy issues. But it was always painful for me. And like it was like someone was just had forks and they were just scraping the
Mm-hmm.
insides. And it was always painful until I got to the point where I left my last long-term relationship. And that was about 12 years ago now, I think. And at the end of that, I kind of did something similar to you. I went, you know what, enough is enough. I cannot physically keep abusing my body
Mm-hmm.
through having relationships with men,
Mm-hmm.
because it's damaging me. It's
Yeah.
damaging my soul and my heart and my physical body, and I have to say no. Of course, that ends up with 12 years later, I still haven't had any relationships, but there's this element of protection and safety where you kind of think, did you go through a phase where you just, after your divorce, you had to go through this phase of trusting, like learning to trust that a man wasn't going to hurt you, either emotionally or physically?
Mm. What an interesting question. Um, because I think the honest answer is yes,
Mm.
but I would actually rephrase it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the person I needed to learn to trust was me.
Mm.
Like, if I saw things that didn't make me comfortable to speak up, how
Oh,
scary was
how did you
that?
do that?
I just I just realized that I was looking for trust and for love and for connection and for acceptance in other people.
Mm.
And I didn't have a great track record with that.
Mm.
And I realized, for me, like, even thinking back to dating after my divorce, is really noticing. Like, I was a little not trustful of me and my decision making. That
Yeah, I
is the
get that.
honest truth.
Yep.
I remember even legitimately having the thought of, I don't trust myself to make choices for myself,
Yeah.
especially as it comes to relationships. And so I think I was the trust that I had to earn was
Mm.
extending the trust to myself.
Mm.
So I was really a little bit more cautious and a little bit more observant, and not just of the people I was dating, but of me. And
Mm.
when was I saying, yes, that sounds great? Or when was I pretending to be someone that I wasn't? Or when was I getting quiet? Like, for me, one of the ways my trauma shows up is by, I just call it like shutting down. Like, I'm closed.
Yeah.
I'm now closed. And it looks very nice and pleasing and very calm.
Mm.
So I would notice when I wasn't sharing opinions. I was noticing when I wasn't sharing preferences. And it took a lot of work, honestly, um, of just really kind of calling me on myself, of why wouldn't you just say you like something or not like something? And,
But
why
it's
do you
so
feel
hard
like I
though.
have to bend to
It's
someone
so
else?
hard. It is so
It
hard.
is,
I have to
but it's
interrupt.
worth
It's
it.
so hard Because as you're talking and you're sharing this on the inside, I'm cringing, going, no, I don't want to do that. Don't make me do that. It's so hard because I'm thinking you're talking about partners, but this is with anyone. This is like friendships and just
friendships, work,
communicating with people just in general. When someone asks you to do something and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, but I'm just going to say yes because technically I could do it. And if I say no, then I'm going to have to go through that trauma. And for me, it comes down to, I don't want to have to go through any more trauma. So it's so much easier just to say yes.
Yeah, but you're putting yourself through trauma anyway.
Yes, but it's a different kind of trauma because it's trauma, and it's interesting because I've got a hair on my eyelash. It's interesting because I see two different types of trauma inside of me. I see the trauma that I do to myself, and then I see the trauma that other people do to me. And I find the trauma that I do to myself a lot easier to handle and to forgive and to manage because I can kind of, if I know the trauma is coming and it's me doing it, then there's a part of me that kind of puts up this protective wall and goes, it's okay, you do the trauma, but it's going to hit this cushion. It's still going to hurt, but at least it's going to be softer than if it's trauma coming at me from someone else that I don't know or I can't predict. It's that unpredictable trauma. I don't, and this comes from being raised by a mum and dad. My mum was an alcoholic and my dad was just an asshole. Never knowing how they were going to react to something that I did. And so it's very unpredictable trauma. So there's all that protection in there that you just, I don't know what to do with that. So I'm really interested to hear that you just took it very slow and did it bit by bit. And because that's kind of what I get is you've kind of got to make that one decision that one time to stand up for yourself and to say, actually, no. And then ease into that and go, okay, that maybe that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then do the next one and just take each one at a time, as opposed to going, I'm just going to stand up for myself and that's it. Is that kind of how it was for you, where you just kind of took each situation one at a time?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to building self-trust or self-love, which is such a buzzword, but it is so critical. Because when you learn through practice to treat yourself with kindness, respect, and that your opinion of you matters more than anyone else's opinion of you, it really is built one decision at a time. And that is eventually where I came to, is my opinion of me legitimately is more important than anyone else's opinion of me on this planet ever, including my kids. And that's so liberating.
Yeah.
Because that means that it doesn't matter how other people react to me, because that's about them. That's about their own baggage. And it was built one opinion stated at a time, one no, thank you, I don't want to do that this weekend at a time. I don't think I'll be volunteering for that at a time. It's one tiny decision to ask myself, what is best for me here? Do I want to say yes? Do I want to say no? And then following through on that and letting other people have their reactions. But yeah, it was a slow building process.
And then how did
absolutely worth it. Yeah.
How did you handle the trauma from the reactions when they weren't good? Because obviously when you're in a box, then you're always reacting one particular way. Then you attract to people, to you, the kind of person that they validate that. They want that. Yeah. I'm finding I'm in this position now where I look around at all my friends and go, shit, if I say no, or if I push back, and I actually just did push back, and this whole thing is blowing up in a huge way because I went, no, you know what? I need to say no. And so now I'm in this situation where my no has created a very big ricochet effect. How did you deal with that when your no created a lot of conflict, or maybe it never created big conflict for you, but if it did, how did you deal with that?
I mean, it is easy for me to say here today, but when someone's having a large reaction to something that I do, it's generally because they're having a temper tantrum because they want me to do things their way.
Yeah.
And I don't like to be manipulated.
Mm.
And for me, in a way, I started to see that when I would say yes and it wasn't real, when I would give in to get by, I was actually being manipulative too. And I started to see it as a dance. And I'm like, this dance is just people lying to each other. And I'm manipulating them into thinking I'm compliant and I'm this and I'm something that I'm not. And seeing that shifted things a little bit for me. But I also started to, this is going to sound maybe a little bit wild or out there, but I thought trauma is a series of strategies. Our brain develops strategies when we're in these events. And I started to ask myself, if it did it to be beneficial then, what can I keep? And there is something about, like, that dissociation when you're out of your body because you're usually in a situation you don't want to be in. So your mind says goodbye, and your body is there in the event.
Yeah.
And I started to almost, that ability to disassociate also has made me an observer of people. And I started to ask myself to observe the situation. So I kind of, for me, I wouldn't have necessarily framed it this way before, but that ability to disassociate, to get some distance on a situation I was in, I sort of repurposed that. And I started really watching the way other people were reacting to me and noticing how childish it was in a lot of cases. And I thought, oh, they want me to, like, put in, coins in their little happiness meter. And they think I'm the one responsible for feeding that.
That is such a good point. And I want to thank you for sharing all of that, because I don't think I'd owned how manipulative my behavior can be to people. For me, I get now, after just listening to you, it's just all kind of unraveled in my brain, that the manipulation comes from just a series of protection mechanisms that have been in place over time to teach me how to communicate with someone so they don't react to me in any kind of negative way and they don't create any form of trauma. But you're right, it is just this constant, I think about friends that I interact with now, and we have very differing opinions about certain things, but I don't say anything about my differing opinions because I know the friendship would end, because they're not people that are very accepting of people that have different opinions. I know, because they've already, through the last 3 years and through what's happened over the last 3 years, they've already cut a whole series of people out of their lives because they didn't have the same views and the same values and the same opinions. And I remember thinking just a couple of weeks ago, I need to decide how much I value their friendship and how much I value myself. And where is my value system in having people that I have to constantly compromise myself for, but then also constantly, for me, it's more manipulate myself. I have to manipulate myself to conform into this bubble of whoever I'm standing in front of at the time. And it's I'm feeling extraordinarily uncomfortable because now I'm like, shit, do I have to do something with this? Because once you know it and you see it, all of a sudden I don't know if I can play this game anymore. I don't know if I can keep manipulating myself to be who other people want me to be, but then also manipulating other people at the same time. It's hard. And then it comes back to that trust. Well, I need to trust that if I make the decision to start being brutally honest, I shouldn't say brutally because that makes it sound horrible. If I start being honest with myself, that yes, okay, those people might go, but then other people will come that actually like me for who I am in that honesty, as opposed to having all of these people around me that I'm constantly trying to be someone that I'm actually not for, based on my protection and my manipulation and programs.
Right.
There wasn't a question in
Well,
that. I just wanted to share it.
I love that. And one thing that I noticed, and especially doing the research and the conversation as I've had, and just my own evolution of understanding, is when a child is in a traumatic situation, it's not like you have options. If you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, it's not like you can leave.
Yeah.
And so we do learn to, I remember as a little girl, like sitting places, actually imagining like that I was the furniture and I was invisible. I loved being as invisible as possible, as often as possible. And it's because when you're a child, you can't just say, I think I'm going to go live in Idaho now. You can't leave.
I've had enough of your trauma. I'm out of here.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
I think that that part of our brain that goes into this, please be pleasing, don't ruffle feathers, don't rock the boat, however your brain, messages to you to just you're the peacekeeper. You keep things calm, you don't activate people. And like you said, we do tend to attract people. Like if we're people who keep the peace, we tend to attract people who need someone to do that for them.
Yeah.
But when we're adults, we do have choices. Like we don't have choices in our parents or our, systems of origin, but we do have choices as friends. And honestly, when when each one of us learns that the company we have at the end of the day and how we feel about ourselves, that it would be preferable to have no one around than those people around, we do tend to be a little bit more self-trusting, but then we tend to attract people who are a little bit better at regulating their emotional selves too. As we grow up, so do the communities we tend to attract.
It's also hard when I look around, especially watching shows or even watching stuff on YouTube where people talk about how they've had friends since high school. They've been best friends for 40 years. And my family, we're very different, but my mom had friends in her life that she'd known for 20, 30, 40 years. My grandma had her best friend she met when she was 3. And they knew each other for 90 years. Until he passed away. And it's like, God, I don't even know what to do with that. I don't have friendships because of my trauma and because of my protection and because of the whole story. I don't have friendships that last that long. I don't have friendships that last more than a couple of years and then they just dissolve or disappear. So there's also this judgment of there's something wrong with me because I'm not holding on to friends longer than a year, 2 years, maybe 5 years. And so then you've got to battle against that as well and not go down the shame spiral of, well, there's something wrong with me because I can't hold friends, or there's something wrong with me because I can only have these types of friends, but I don't even enjoy their friendship.
Yeah.
And it's there's so much. And then it comes all the way back to what you said, which is trust in yourself, trust in your ability, trust to drop the protection mechanisms and trust to drop the manipulation and trust that if you are honest and say no to somebody and you let them walk away if they need to, that somebody else is going to come. And when I used to do this with my daughter when she was younger, because she would meet people, kids are mean. Like, kids are mean. God, they can be so horrible. And she'd walk away and she'd go, Mom, I really want friends. Like, I really want friends. And I said, yeah, I get that. I said, but you get to choose in this moment. Do you want to compromise yourself and have friends that aren't that nice? Or do you want to trust? Because we talk about the universe and we talk about Mother Gaia, and back then it was Mother Gaia because that's what she really identified with. I said, do you want to trust that Mother Gaia is taking care of you and that she is very gently and very carefully working out who you are and working out who other kids are, and she will send to you kids that are beautiful, but you just have to be willing to trust that she will do that by letting these ones that aren't nice go. And I said, sometimes there's like this little test where you get to choose whether you're going to compromise yourself or not. And what do you want to do? Do you want to compromise yourself for these kids just so you can have someone to play with? Or do you want to trust that some really, really nice kids are coming your way? And each time we had that conversation, she would make the decision to let that kid go. And then after, we did this for 2.5 years of her just constantly meeting these horrible kids. And then one day we met a group of people and the kids were beautiful and they were kind. And I remember sitting down saying to her, so honey, we've just gone through almost 2.5 years of you saying no to these mean kids. Was it worth the wait? Now that you found these kids that are beautiful and kind, was it actually worth saying no to all of those other people and not compromising? And I remember her looking at me going, yeah, it was worth the wait. And I actually took a moment to pat myself on the back and go, that was a good parenting moment because I'm not doing the same trauma to her that happened to me. I'm saying, no, you don't have to have people around you that are mean. You can wait. You don't have to compromise yourself. And that's what I'm teaching her is you don't have to compromise yourself. But I haven't worked out how to do that for me yet. Is to trust in that divine, trust that the divine. And then that comes back to, I guess, the abundance and not the scarcity. There's so much, I don't know about you, but for me, there's so much scarcity mindset through the trauma. There's always that there's not enough. There's so much lack through the trauma that trying to find that abundant mindset and believing that there is an abundance of love and there's an abundance of kindness and there's an abundance of happiness and joy and friendships and partners, it's actually really hard. The scarcity is just so anchored in deep. This is probably a whole new rabbit hole to go down, but did you have to unravel that scarcity as well to move into abundance?
Oh, so much. And I do think we're living in different times where I think it is more rare in general that people are still close to the friends they went, to school with when they were young children, because people move and relocate. And I just think there's just less longevity in friendships in general. And a lot of the studies actually show that. But I would say absolutely yes. I always thought I needed to get into acceptance. Oh, I will find a man and then I will have I was always really attracted, so I thought, to people who seemed to have normal families. The trick was always on me. It always looked good from the outside, but even with friends, oh, I need to have more friends and need to be social a certain way. In my mind, it always showed up thinking things needed to look a certain way. Oh, I would know I was close friends when. But what is interesting, and it not a fast adjustment for me, but gradually, what I came to understand is I enjoy loving people unconditionally. Again, so grateful for my children because talk about the train track that took me down one direction. Without them, I don't think I would have experienced true unconditional love. I don't care if they have a grumpy day or they have a great day. I don't take that personally either way. I just love them. Love them. And I started to notice this thought of, I always wanted to be unconditionally loved and to offer unconditional love. But boy, I seem to have a lot of friendships and relationships where it seemed like the conditions of them staying with me were very specific and fragile.
Yeah.
And that idea of, oh, if I say this, then I'm going to create a blow up. And I thought, well, that's a really conditional relationship. I grew up with a lot of conditional relationships in the family, like, you're dead to us now, you know? So there was a lot of like, this relative did this thing and we're no longer talking to them. And that kind of um, conditional connection was
Mhm.
very much a part of my family culture. And I started to realize, like, don't I want to be loved for who I am? Isn't this what I'm so hungry for? I want to be accepted and loved for who I am, even as broken as I am, would have been how I
Mhm.
would have said it a decade ago.
Mhm.
Um, but I realized that I seemed to be connected to a lot of people who had a lot of conditions on my performance.
Mm.
And when I started to see it from that lens of, I want to develop unconditional friendships, like the kinds of friends who are there when you call and that you're there for them,
Yeah.
it increased my tolerance to saying no,
Mhm.
because I just didn't want to spend as much time investing in conditional friendships.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I had someone once when I was a coach a long time ago when I was talking to him about the kind of friendships I had. And he said, so basically, you're using people.
Mm,
I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're using people
mm,
to feed your program.
mm,
And he said, if you can stop using people to feed your program
mm,
and you can move into your whole self,
mm.
then your friendships will change. And it
Yeah,
took a bit for me
yeah.
to really own, I guess he's right. And now it's interesting now when I look at people and I look at how I engage with people, I can see how much I'm
Mm,
using them for something. Like they're there
mm,
because they have something that I want and I'm willing to compromise myself for that.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, that comes back to the manipulation
mm.
of, well, this is just a relationship based on manipulation. Like
Yeah.
and that's not a real relationship. It's not a real friendship.
Mm,
It's, it's like, it's empty. It's kind of like empty
mhm.
calories. There's nothing in it. Um,
Right.
yeah, it's going to take me a minute to stomach all of that and to own it, really
Uh,
to own that, to
uh,
own that a little bit, own it a little bit deeper, that they are the
yeah.
friendships that I have around me. And do I want that?
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. Um, I can keep asking questions and I can keep talking. Um, but was there anything that you wanted to add that you kind of feel,
Mm.
based on everything we've talked about now, that you think
Mhm.
will bring it into a really great, safe space to kind of anchor in someone's ability
Yeah.
that they can trust, or
Yeah.
they can let go of friendships, or they can walk away from partners, and there is
Mhm.
something on the other side?
Yeah, and one thing I am very mindful of, and it is not, yeah, I haven't found the most elegant way to navigate it, in all honesty, is it's easy for me to say where I am now,
Mm,
um, how, like, I really feel like I have freed myself from creating a lot of suffering for myself.
mhm,
And it took a lot of work. And when I think about how did I get from that person here?
mm,
It's not so much that it's a mystery to me, it's that it's a challenge to turn it into like a teachable process is the part where I feel a little clunky about it. But I would say that for me, with the shifts really shifted when I started to remember that this is my life. I
mm,
teach a lot of my clients, like, this is the movie of you. You are the only person in every single scene. You are the only person that you will be with every single nanosecond of your life.
yeah.
And when I really started to ask myself, what, not just, like, oh, how can I love myself better? Because I was like, whatever. I felt like a lot of those concepts and the teachings, they sounded good. Like I wanted to feel a lot of self generosity and self compassion and self love, but it almost started um, really shifting for me when I started to prime my mind for what I appreciated about my life. Like when I turned it from these big concepts into small, like I appreciate fun pencils with little designs, and when I can appreciate a sunny day, and when I can appreciate the like a good night's sleep. And I really started to just think about appreciation. And then I started maneuvering into what do I appreciate about being me? And at first my mind was really, really committed to that. No, we hate Lisa. Let's talk about how she's bad and dangerous and insufficient. It really was trenched into arguing with that. And so I kind of stopped arguing back. I stopped forcing myself to love someone that at the time, I didn't really like that much. So I just started asking myself the question, how can I listen to this part of me without giving into it? So this it just the compassion of what I always was so hungry for from my therapists, from my partners, from, my friends, from my career, is I wanted to be understood and listened to. I wanted someone to see me and to not look at me as a pile of flaws and not look at me as a broken person. And so I just started asking myself, what's going on with you? What do you want me to tell me right now? And I started really, really listening and really, really listening to what was happening in my body, because I think our bodies are wise. And for me, that just really shifted the whole paradigm. So I'll give a specific example because I think that helps rather than this kind of theoretical. I noticed that I would get nervous every time, or like anxious every time I would leave home. I'd pack the kids up in the car and it's like, we're going to the park, and I would feel like this wall of anxiety up inside me. I just want to stay. I want to stay in my little safe nest. I just want to be home.
I know this feeling.
And
keep talking.
yes. And as I would like back away from the house, I would feel like every cell in my body was like, no, 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 no. And instead of being like, why am I so anxious? What's wrong? Like almost like treating myself like I was a therapy patient, I would just start labeling it. This is the leaving the house feeling. This is the leaving the house feeling. When I leave like this, what am I saying to myself? And now, now I don't feel it all that often, but I still do. I'll still leave, especially after COVID when they sent us all home. And I was like, great, I'm going to brick up the front door. I'm never leaving again.
COVID was the best for me too. I don't have to go anywhere. Awesome. And there's no judgment about me going anywhere.
No.
Even better.
No, so I just started starting with just labeling, like, oh, it's the leaving the house feeling, like, oh, this is that nervous to pick up the phone feeling. Oh, this is the I'm going to say something and they're going to get upset, like that clenchy feeling. And I just started labeling, I'm having feelings, it's in my body, and just kind of normalizing. Like, just because I don't like leaving my house does not mean there's something wrong with me. It means I would rather stay home. That's it. And just really like de-escalating a lot of that. And that was enough self-kindness to change my life.
I can imagine that would do a lot of change, actually.
Yeah, over time, when you just start, instead of like, what's wrong with me? Oh, am I feeling? Instead of just going, yep, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. Kind of like a loving parent would do for a child.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of see that as when you stop punishing yourself for the feelings that you have.
Yep.
And when I'm going through a thing at the moment where I have very big feelings, not getting flashbacks so much anymore, but I have very big feelings. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with very big feelings. And I've started lying there looking at that going, I approve of the feeling that I'm having right now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
allowing the feeling that I'm having right now. It's one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I realized was a lot of the things I was doing stemmed from disapproval, just
Mm-hmm.
constant disapproval of myself, and then constant disapproval of the feelings and the thoughts, because there's so much out there that says you have to have this particular type of mindset. And if you don't have this
Yeah.
mindset, then you're going to have this life. So there's already so
Yeah.
much punishment out there
Yeah.
towards people just for thinking and feeling what they're thinking and feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding I have to unravel that and
Yeah.
and approve of the feelings instead of disapproving of the feelings. And yeah, I kind
Yeah.
of get that's the same sort of thing of, being kind to yourself and putting down the bat
Yeah.
and going, you know what, I don't have to punish myself anymore.
Well, and I really started thinking like, oh, when my brain reacts this way, when I have an emotional reaction, it's just a strategy. Like these are the most important computers in our lives is the
Mm-hmm.
brains that we have, and everything it's doing is just it's just in service of us.
Yeah.
And I started to really understand like there's nothing in this system that is me that would really actually put myself in a lot of danger.
Mm.
Like it's just trying its best to help me out. And we aren't like animals. Like if you think about like a lot of the work on trauma, if a hyena is chasing a gazelle and then gives, it catches one and the other gazelle gets free, the gazelle like releases that fear of death. Like there's all this somatic stuff that it will do. But when, it's not as clear cut when it's
Mm.
a 4-year-old child in an environment where, the hyenas look a lot like gazelles. And so I think we're just not even used to like processing. Like that is actually just a really good tip too, is when someone is feeling really activated, is to just like get up and shake the body and like almost just like really shake a lot of that energy
Mm.
loose. It can actually really help. And it just sends a signal of I've got you. And even just shaking and, like shaking your limbs, moving your body and saying, I've got you. I'm taking care of you. I'm here for you.
Mm.
That can actually be a pretty powerful mechanism for like releasing really strong emotions in the moment. Because the big emotions are there because we're thinking something, and we're thinking something because our brain thinks it's something important for us to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So everything is like when I started realizing like, oh, everything that I do is actually a brilliant strategy. I actually started to have a higher opinion of myself.
I am so well versed in this. I'm an
Yeah.
expert in protecting myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it makes total sense that I would wake up in the middle of the night with this like pressing feeling because
Mm.
this is important to me. Of course, of course. Like, it took a while for me to start saying, great job, brain. But I did get there.
And I think I'll finish with this because I think that having children almost puts a megaphone
Yeah.
on that fear,
Yeah.
because then you start getting all of these images coming up of all the different ways things can go wrong with kids, and
Mm-hmm.
and all the different things that can happen. And I get bubble parenting because there's just
Yeah.
so much fear that, but what if my kid's jumping on the trampoline and they
Yeah.
break their neck? And I
Oh,
see
yeah.
that a lot because my daughter does all sorts of crazy stuff on the trampoline. She always has.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that a lot. So it takes a lot for me to not project that onto her and go, don't do that. Get off the trampoline. You're being too dangerous. You're being too stupid, or you're being too silly. I just sit there and my insides are crapping themselves while I'm watching
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
doing what she's doing. But I'm aware that, well, but this is my fear. This is my fear that I don't want anything to happen to her. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I have to stop her doing what she's doing. I can
Mm-hmm.
just sit in the fear of me not wanting something to happen to her while she keeps
Mm-hmm.
having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we spend so much time protecting ourselves against something that might happen.
Yeah.
And and if something happens, what we're most afraid of is what it's going to be like to be us. on the other side of something we didn't prevent.
Yeah. I really can keep talking. So I can keep talking about this for hours.
Me too.
Where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you? What have you got going on course-wise?
Yeah, so I have my website is lisaschwaller.com, and you can find all my social places. And I do have an online course for stop overreacting in front of your family. So that has been really kind of a hit. And what's really funny is now I have a podcast called Less Stress, More Fun. So because I really do believe that even with all the things people have dealt with in their upbringing and deal with as adults, that there's so much we can do to have a less stressful existence, and yes, even have more fun.
Yeah, I love
Life
it.
is hard. It is. There's no sugarcoating it, and it's not all like moonbeams and affirmations. And there's just so much more that I think so many people can claim ownership over in their own experience. And I am passionate about helping people connect to that.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I knew it was going to be good.
It was my pleasure.
Oh, that was so good. I'm gonna take so much of this conversation, and it's just validated so much that I've started doing. So I really want to thank you for that. It really has validated. It's validated the allowing the thoughts, allowing the feelings, and the trust. My next thing is the standing up for myself. That's why it was such a big conversation for me in this, because I know that's my next thing, is the honesty, standing up for myself, and saying what's true for me. That's my next thing. So that was really good.
It's a process, and even like a little bit more practical, even like little things you can do during the day to establish that you can depend on yourself. So one strategy that I work with is like kind of short-term future self work. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, you get in touch with your future self, and it's this amazing person who can do all the things we can't do today. And it feels a little bit unreal. It feels really like fantasy. But I'll teach people, like, when you're like, do something before you go to bed, like maybe it's cleaning up the kitchen, and just telling yourself, I'm doing this for tomorrow me. And then when you wake up in the morning and you come in and the kitchen is all tidy and clean, you can say, oh, last night me, thank you. That was so thoughtful of you.
That is
And
such a good job.
and really like blow it out of proportion a little bit. And because it might be something you do anyway, or maybe not, but just those little connections between today you to tomorrow you, and then tomorrow you saying thank you to yesterday you, that is such a beautiful way to build a relationship with yourself. That's trusting.
Can I ask you a quick question? I know it's probably getting late for you, but I really want to hear this because I think you might resonate with this. Did you have issues like doing things consistently? So whether it is washing the dishes, like for me, it's hard to wash the dishes every day. It's hard for me to clean out the kitty litter every day. It's hard for me to make the bed every day. It's hard for me to have a tidy house. Like if you saw what was behind this black screen, it's like it's a shit fit back there. And then looking forward, it's like, oh my God, my little zone here looks really well put together, but out here it's chaos. Did you find that really hard? And I put it down to that lack of self-care and that lack of trust, like that trusting in yourself to take those consistent actions to take care of yourself. Did you find like all of that too?
Yeah. And I found that I did not like when you meet someone who's like, oh, you just need more discipline. And I was like, oh, I can't stand people like that. I did not like have you heard of
hold
Gretchen
on,
Rubin's?
I've lost sound.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it was you or me. It's me. Hang on a sec.
Okay.
I sat on my headphone connector. Go.
Yeah.
I can hear you now.
So, I am a Gretchen Rubin of her four tendencies. I'm a rebel, which she describes as you don't tell me what to do and I don't either. And I really did not like discipline or a lot of like just plan it and do it.
Or
I
willpower.
really
Just
rebelled
get
against that.
willpower.
Just
Yeah.
get willpower. And and so the short answer is yes. I found
Okay.
it really hard to be really consistent. And when I asked myself to, I would just I just didn't like that sense of being controlled, even though it
Yeah.
was for something that I wanted. And so I just found just little ways to just appreciate. I really, for me, gratitude feels heavier. Like I am so grateful. I am so grateful. But appreciation feels much lighter and easier to just pick. So I would just, if I did something, I would be like, man, I just really appreciated that I did that. That was all right. And I just
Mm.
kept it really lightweight and not committal. And I started dropping a lot of that compliance, and I just really ramped up appreciation. And it's easier to do nice things for someone who appreciates it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just really,
Yeah.
then after a while, it just like now it's so crazy. I use ClickUp is my it's a task management, and I'm
Mhm.
so consistent in so many areas of my life that I'm like, I don't even recognize myself anymore. Like I just do things like at certain times or on certain days I do this and I don't even think about it anymore.
Mm,
But
mm.
that was not the case for me. So I just really just when I would do something, I would just be very appreciative. One resource that might be useful is the Tiny Habits book
Mhm.
by BJ Fogg. He talks a lot about just like tiny little, like really celebrating up little things you do.
Mm. I love that you say that. I love that you just said the appreciation, because I've, for years, way back when I first started this 17
Mm,
years ago, and everyone was talking about gratitude, I would always
mm,
look at that and think, but gratitude it feels heavy is a really good word for it. It's really
mhm,
heavy, just
mhm,
drags me through the mud, but I can appreciate anything.
mhm.
I can
Yeah.
appreciate this house. I don't know if I
Mhm,
can be grateful for it, but I can appreciate it. I can
mhm.
appreciate the peace here. I can appreciate appreciation. It just has so much more openness for me.
Yeah.
That
Well, and it's
you're the
not
only other
personal.
person that I've heard feels
Mm.
that difference between appreciation and gratitude.
Well, gratitude feels like I am expected to be grateful for.
Yeah,
It's personal.
yeah,
Where appreciation, like I can, um, I might see someone today, I might go out, in the neighborhood and see someone, cycling, for example. I'm
yeah,
not cycling these days, but I can appreciate that they enjoy it.
yeah.
It's not, it's like it's deep, it's just not personal. I can be
Yes.
like, oh, I really appreciate that that person's interested in whatever. I may have no interest in it, but I can appreciate that they do.
Yeah,
And it's so much like lighter and non-committal
yeah, it
that
really is.
like just going and being like, oh, I just really appreciate. I actually I do a little challenge with people where I'm like, just find 25 things to appreciate every day. Now, some people like having an actual recipe to follow, and then the rebels like me are like, I'll do it or I won't. Maybe I won't.
I had someone set
But
me a challenge the other day,
yeah.
actually. She said, take 2 minutes every morning when you open your eyes and
Uh-huh.
say just 5 things that you're thankful for. And
Hmm.
there is that rebel part of me that goes, yeah, I'm not doing that just because you told me to.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
if you tell me to do something, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I
And
guess there is, I didn't even think
yeah.
about it until this minute right now. There is that learning how to recommunicate with yourself
Mhm.
where you're not telling yourself
Yeah.
to do something. Like, I'm
Yeah.
going to have to come up with a whole new way of how do I communicate again with this self that's like,
Yeah.
don't tell me what to do. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. Bugger off. Because yeah,
Yeah.
it is and I just heard that maybe that's also where the struggle comes from, doing the dishes and making the beds. I'm like, okay, now
Yeah.
we have to do the dishes. No, I don't.
Yeah, like, no, I don't. And then there's probably another character who shows up who's like, you really should. The auditor is what I call that little like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
here
yeah,
with a checklist of good behavior. And
yeah,
and then it just becomes noisy.
yeah, yeah.
And for me, really, just almost being like really curious and really appreciating. Like I always think if there's someone in your life, real, imagined, living, dead, that you would clear your calendar for, like whoever that person would be for you. Like when you spent time with them, you wouldn't be like, you need to do it this way. Are you sure you should do it? Like we would never talk to that person the way we talk to ourselves all day long. And
Oh,
I
I
just
would never
started to
talk to
flirt
my
with,
daughter. Yeah. Or
yeah,
you.
like
Yeah.
whoever would like get priority on your
Mhm.
calendar, and just think about how you would talk to that person, or if they're really in your life every day, how you already talk to them.
Mm.
And then just ask, like, shouldn't I be that for me? Like, what would it be like if I was as delighted to be with me as I am delighted to be with that person?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it comes to then doing things, then over time, I think what ends up happening is then you kind of want to do nice things for yourself. The
Yeah.
same way you probably enjoy doing little things for your daughter and seeing that spark of joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I also just heard, have a look at how I ask her to do things,
Mm.
because I'm probably asking her to do things the way I would want to be asked to do things.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, I just heard that and I went, oh, instead of saying, okay, we need to go do the dishes, I could
Yeah.
actually look at myself and go, could we please go and do the dishes now?
Yeah.
And actually ask
Yeah.
with kindness instead of
Mhm.
just, right, we have to do the dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was lovely meeting you, and it's such a joy and what a gift to be able to have such like a deep open conversation. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
I will. And thank you for sharing so much. I really
Of
appreciate
course.
it. That call was, there's so much. There's so much in that call. I shared a lot of what I got on the way through the call. And I just really want to take a minute to validate for me the trust. The trust is so hard. It's so hard to trust that the choices that I make are right. It's so hard to trust that if I end a friendship or if I stand up for myself, that that's the right decision for me. And it's just hard to try. It's just hard to trust. It's hard to trust that, I don't know, I can't say it in any other way other than I can feel it. It's so intense. It's sitting right in my heart. It is so hard to trust in anything that is going on inside of me. Yeah, it's just hard. It's hard. Oh, I'm feeling it now. It's really intense. Please share in the comments. I would really love to hear what you got from this conversation. It was another gift. I feel so blessed to be having these amazing conversations. Every single one has really moved me into a new state of awareness. It's really opened up my mind, and it's really opened up, I don't know if it's opening up my heart, because at the moment it's really hurting. But it's shifting things, it's moving things. Yeah. So make sure, where do I go from here? Make sure you check out Lisa. I will put all the descriptions. I will put all the links in the description below. So make sure you check out Lisa. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and make sure you share it. If there's anyone that you think would benefit from this episode, or if you're in any CPTSD groups or trauma groups, feel free to share it. There might be some other people in those groups that could really hear this conversation that Lisa and I had today. Remember, you are greatly appreciated. Thank you.